I used to believe my life was unshakable, a routine carved in stone, a husband who worked too much, a son who filled my heart, and a home that looked perfect enough from the street. But on the night my son walked into my room unannounced, that illusion splintered into pieces too sharp to gather. My name is Sarah. I'm 42 years old, a wife to Daniel, and mother to a 12-year-old boy named Ethan. To the world outside, I was the dependable one, the neighbor who waved from the driveway, the parent who baked cupcakes for school events, the wife who remembered birthdays and anniversaries. Inside, though, I had become someone I barely recognized. Daniel was the kind of man people trusted instantly. Steady, hardworking, unfailingly practical. He was the anchor of our family, but he was also a man consumed by deadlines and conference calls. His love was constant but muted, expressed in paying bills on time and repairing leaky faucets rather than in words or touch. Over the years, what connected us had thinned to polite exchanges and shared responsibilities. Ethan, in contrast, was my source of light. Sensitive and quick-witted, he carried an uncanny ability to notice things others overlooked. A shift in tone, a glance too long, a silence stretched too thin. He absorbed it all. Sometimes I thought he knew me better than I knew myself. That night proved me right, though in a way I wish it hadn't. The conflict began long before Ethan opened my bedroom door. It began the moment I let loneliness turn into temptation. Mark, a colleague, slipped into my life like water finding cracks in stone. At first, he was only a friend. Someone who noticed my new haircut when Daniel didn't, who laughed at my jokes as though they mattered. But admiration became affection, and affection became something else entirely. By the time I realized I had crossed a line, I was already too far on the other side. For months, I told myself I was in control, that my secret life existed in a separate universe from my family. It was a fragile illusion, one I guarded fiercely. I never imagined Ethan would be the one to pierce it. That night I thought the house was asleep. The stillness was thick, broken only by the low hum of the ceiling fan. Mark was there, his presence both thrilling and dangerous. I told myself no one would ever know, that my walls were impenetrable. Then came the sound, a soft creak of hinges. My bedroom door opened, and in the pale spill of hallway light stood Ethan. His face was bleary with sleep, his small hand curled around the doorframe. For a single breath, I thought he was only looking for comfort after a nightmare. Instead, I became the nightmare he stumbled into. What followed was silence, heavy and raw, as his gaze landed on the truth I had hidden from everyone. And in that moment, I realized the real conflict wasn't between Daniel and me, or even between me and Mark. It was between the person I pretended to be and the woman my son had just discovered. To understand the weight of that night, you need to know who we were before the door opened, before Ethan's wide eyes stripped away every illusion I had built. Daniel. My husband had always been the safe choice. When I met him, I admired his steadiness, the way he carried himself with quiet confidence. He wasn't flashy or impulsive. He was dependable, grounded, a man whose presence promised stability. For years, that was enough. But stability, I learned, can harden into distance. His days grew longer, consumed by work, and his affection shrank into routine gestures. A kiss on the cheek, a muttered good night. He gave me a life, a home, and a son. But somewhere along the way, he stopped giving me himself. Ethan was the opposite, alive in ways his father no longer was. Sensitive and perceptive, he asked questions that startled me with their depth. At 12, he hovered on the edge of adolescence, no longer a boy, yet not quite a teenager. He still carried the softness of childhood, but there was steel forming beneath it, the kind that noticed fractures others ignored. He was my confidant in small ways, the one who noticed when I was tired, the one who slipped handwritten notes onto the kitchen counter that said things like, "Don't worry. Mom, you're the best." His love was unfiltered, absolute, and it was that very purity that made my betrayal so unforgivable. Then there was Mark. He was the danger I invited in, the whisper I leaned toward when silence at home grew unbearable. Mark had charm Daniel never cared to wield. He paid attention to my words, my laughter, my smallest changes. Where Daniel offered predictability, Mark offered possibility. That possibility became my undoing. The central conflict was born in the space between those men. The man I married, the man I strayed toward, and the boy who would one day uncover everything. I told myself I could balance it, that I could carry the weight of deceit without letting it topple the life Daniel and I had built. Mark was just a hidden corner of my world, an indulgence I could pack away when dinner needed to be made or laundry folded. But secrets are never truly separate. They bleed, staining the edges of everything, and Ethan, my sweet, watchful Ethan, was the one who noticed the stains first. He saw the distracted glances, the unexplained smiles, the phone lighting up after midnight. He didn't say anything then, but I realize now he was cataloging each detail, piecing together a truth I was desperate to conceal. That night, when he pushed open my door, it wasn't just a boy stumbling into his mother's mistake. It was the moment the three worlds I tried to keep apart, marriage, affair, motherhood, collided in one unbearable instant. And once colliding, nothing could hold them apart again. The morning after Ethan walked in, the house felt different, quieter, heavier, as if the walls themselves had overheard what he had seen. He avoided me at breakfast, eyes glued to his cereal bowl, fingers drumming against the table in a rhythm too quick to be casual. Daniel didn't notice. He kissed my cheek, grabbed his travel mug, and rushed out the door with his usual distracted efficiency. Only Ethan and I remained in the silence that followed. "Ethan," I said gently, but he stood before I could finish. "I'm not hungry," he muttered, abandoning his half-eaten bowl. His footsteps thundered upstairs, leaving me with a knot of dread in my chest. That became our rhythm, his avoidance, my guilt. He slipped into his room after school, headphones on, door locked. He barely answered when spoken to, and when he did, his voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut. Each distance he created was a reminder of the moment that had shattered him, the moment I could never take back. I tried to speak to him one evening as he sat curled on the couch, knees hugged tight. "Ethan, please, can we talk about what you saw?" His head snapped toward me, anger blazing in his young eyes. "I don't want to talk about it. I don't even want to look at you." The words gutted me. My son, who once trusted me with every scraped knee and secret, now looked at me as if I were a stranger. Worse, a betrayer. Mark called that night, his voice low, urgent. "We need to talk about what happened." "There's nothing to talk about," I whispered, staring at the darkened hallway where Ethan's door was closed. "My son saw us. Do you understand what that means?" Silence. Then, "Do you want me to come over?" The thought was unbearable. "No," I snapped. "You've already done enough." I hung up before he could respond, shame tightening like a rope around my throat. Days blurred into weeks, each one thick with unspoken tension. Ethan's coldness spread into the air we breathed, and though Daniel remained oblivious, I knew the facade was crumbling. Ethan wouldn't carry this burden forever. He was too honest, too wounded. Sooner or later he would tell. One evening, I found him sitting outside on the porch steps, the glow of the setting sun on his face. I sat beside him, careful to leave space between us. "You hate me," I whispered. He didn't deny it. Instead, he said, "You broke Dad's heart, and mine." The words were soft, but their truth was devastating. I opened my mouth to reply, but he stood, retreating into the house before I could. I sat alone in the cooling air, realizing that the true punishment for my choices was not exposure. It was watching the bond with my son unravel thread by thread. And I knew then, the secret would not stay hidden much longer. The night it all unraveled began like any other. Daniel suggested a family movie, his attempt at normalcy after another long week at work. Popcorn bowls, blankets, the three of us on the couch, the picture of togetherness. But beneath the surface, tension thrummed like a wire pulled too tight. Ethan sat stiffly beside me, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the screen though his mind was elsewhere. Halfway through the film, he shifted suddenly, his body rigid with decision. "Dad," he said, voice unsteady but determined. "I have to tell you something. Daniel muted the television, brows knitting.
"What is it, son?"
The room seemed to shrink. My heart pounded, my throat closed. Ethan's eyes flicked to me, then back to his father. "Mom's cheating on you." The words landed like a thunderclap. Silence crashed down, heavy and suffocating. Daniel blinked, confusion etched deep in his features. "What are you talking about?" Ethan's voice wavered, but he pressed on. "I saw her, with someone else, in your bed." I wanted to speak, to stop the avalanche before it buried us all, but the truth was already out. Daniel turned to me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. "Sarah, tell me he's lying." I couldn't. Not with Ethan watching, his young face taut with both pain and conviction. My lips parted, but only one word emerged, fragile as glass. "No." Daniel reeled back as if struck. His chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. "How long?" His voice was low, guttural. "Months," I whispered, each syllable tasting of ash. The silence fractured into rage. Daniel surged to his feet, pacing the room, his hands tugging at his hair. Unbelievable. "After everything, after all these years, this is what you've been doing." His voice cracked, raw with betrayal. Ethan's face crumpled, tears spilling freely now. "I didn't want to tell," he sobbed, "but I couldn't keep it anymore." Daniel pulled him into his arms, shielding him from me as though I were the danger. Watching them, I felt the depth of my crime. Not just against Daniel, but against Ethan, who had carried the weight of my secret until it crushed him. I reached out, desperate. "Please, let me explain." "Don't!" Daniel snapped, his voice cutting sharp as glass. "You've explained enough." The room dissolved into chaos. Daniel's fury, Ethan's sobs, my own desperate apologies lost in the storm. And when it was over, I knew nothing in our lives would return to what it had been. The truth had been spoken, and there was no taking it back. After the night of Ethan's confession, the house no longer felt like a home. The walls carried echoes of words too heavy to forget, and the air between us thickened with silence. Daniel slept in the guest room for 3 nights before moving into a hotel. Ethan followed soon after, choosing to stay with him rather than with me. The absence of their footsteps, their voices, their laughter, was louder than any argument could have been. I filed the days with empty routines. I folded laundry no one wore, cooked meals no one ate, scrubbed floors already clean. The silence pressed down, reminding me of what I had lost. Not just a marriage, but the trust of the one person who once believed I was infallible. Daniel filed for divorce within a month. The process was clinical, stripped of the tenderness we once shared. His lawyer called mine. Papers exchanged. Signatures scrawled across documents that dismantled nearly 2 decades of life together. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He simply detached, as if the only way to survive was to carve me out of his world completely. Ethan was different. His anger was raw, unpolished. On the rare weekends I saw him, he spoke little. When he did, his words were heavy, deliberate. "You hurt Dad," he said once, eyes hard as stone. Then, after a pause, "You hurt me too." There was nothing I could say in return. No excuse strong enough, no apology deep enough. I could only sit with the truth, tasting its bitterness every day. And yet, beneath the wreckage, I searched for fragments of meaning. I realized betrayal isn't just a single act, it's a ripple. It fractures the ground beneath everyone standing on it, leaving them to stumble on pieces they never asked to carry. For Daniel, the fracture was the loss of trust in the woman he thought he knew. For Ethan, it was the collapse of childhood certainty, that his parents were unshakable, that his home was safe. For me, it was the reflection of who I had become, someone I barely recognized in the mirror. At night, I still hear the sound of the door creaking open, see the outline of Ethan framed by hallway light. That moment plays on repeat, reminding me of the exact second my world shifted from before to after. Do I regret it? Absolutely. But regret is a cage that doesn't unlock the past. What I hope, what I cling to, is that time may soften the edges of Ethan's pain. That one day, he will see me not just as the mother who failed him, but as a flawed woman who stumbled, who paid dearly for her mistakes, who still loves him beyond measure. Until then, I live with the silence, the memory, and the ache of a single night that rewrote my life. Because sometimes the worst betrayals are not the ones whispered in secret, but the ones spoken aloud by the very voices you swore you'd protect.